difficult odds because there are still a number of Hezbollah fighters who have access to arms and equipment inside Lebanon, but seize this moment to try to establish actual political stability for Lebanon.
Who do you want to do that?
So look, I'm not...
You're listening to a State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, there, reiterating that in accordance with the U.S. ironclad commitment to Israel's security, U.S. forces in the region helped Israel defend against Iranian-launched missiles targeting Israel. One of the issues that kept coming up in all of those questions that he was being asked was this news that came out that Reuters was reporting that Iran had notified the U.S. shortly before their attack. Now, a diplomat from the Iranian mission at the UN has told Sky News that no notice was given to the United States prior to their response. However, a serious warning was issued afterwards. And Matthew Miller there confirming that Iran had not informed the United States. In the last few minutes, we've also heard from the Pentagon, and they've said that we were not aware of any warning by Iran ahead of their attack on Israel. Well, let's bring in our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is at the United Nations in New York. And Don, we were just hearing there from Matt Miller. We'd heard earlier from Jake Sullivan. But one of the things I was just saying that Matt Miller kept reiterating was this point that they were not aware and hadn't been told by Iran, as had been reported by Reuters ahead of the attack.
Yeah, and that's in marked contrast, of course, isn't it, to what happened in April when Iran launched its first direct attack ever, a barrage of, I think, around 300 rockets, missiles, cruise missiles and drones. But that was after sort of telegraphing the fact it was going to do so fairly publicly in response to an attack on its consulate in Damascus that killed a number of Iranian high-level military commanders that happened on April the 1st. And in the time between that and the response to retaliation by Iran, it made it pretty clear it was going to carry out this attack, allowing, and it was assumed deliberately allowing, Israel and its allies to prepare for that so that the impact wouldn't be escalatory. Now, that didn't happen today. As you say, we're being told by diplomats here, Iranian diplomats here at the UN, that no more warning was given, but a warning has been given afterwards. And that warning will be in line with what the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is saying in Tehran, which is a warning to Israel. If you respond to this, if you retaliate to what we've done today, there will be, in the words of their statement, severe blows. And they, in the same statement, said this was carried out to avenge the death of Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah commander, who was the most important Iranian ally in the region until Israel assassinated him. So a clear warning from the Iranians to Israel and its allies, and we've also had clear warnings from the Americans ahead of this attack. And the question, of course, for people like Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, who spoke at the White House ahead of that State Department briefing we've just been listening to, the question for him is, if you did threaten severe consequences, if Iran was to carry out this attack, what will those consequences be? He said that is a fair question, but I'm not going to answer it at this stage. It's too early to say. We're in discussions with our Israeli partners. So that is obviously the question overhanging the region and the escalating conflict there. What does Israel do in response? And if it attacks Iran's nuclear facilities, which Israeli officials had said through at least one highly well-sourced, well-placed American journalist in the New York Times today, they said that if Iran attacks Israel, Israel will go after Iran's nuclear facilities. Whatever action Israel takes in response, will America support it? Certainly supported it and defended it during this extraordinary second direct missile attack carried out by Iran on Israel in the two countries' history. We heard from the Pentagon that at least a dozen interceptor missiles were fired from a naval destroyer, and clearly the Americans were working very closely with the Israelis to defend them from this attack. But what happens next? What does Israel do next? And will America support it if it goes as far as attacking Iranian facilities inside the Iranian borders?
Dom, thank you so much for all of your analysis there from New York, and we will no doubt be speaking in the next half hour. I'll be back at 9 o'clock in about 30 minutes' time on my show, The World. But for now, let's cross over to my colleague, SJ. SJ, over to you.
Yalda, thank you very much. Yalda Hakim there for us this evening in Beirut. As she said, she will be back at 9 o'clock. But for now, we are going to talk about the UK's response to what's been going on in the Middle East tonight. Let's speak to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, because, Sam, we have heard from Downing Street tonight that the Prime Minister had a call with Benjamin Netanyahu this evening at the same time that this attack started.
That's right, Sarah Jane. Look, there's been a lot of focus inside Whitehall, particularly inside Downing Street, at unfolding events in the Middle East and in Lebanon. And yes, this quite extraordinary fact has just been briefed by Number 10. They have confirmed that as the rockets started to land in Israel, Keir Starmer was on the phone to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, underlining the role that I think Britain is trying to play in the unfolding conflict. Look, I think the big news is that Keir Starmer is going to give an address in about 10 minutes to outline where we are following those 200 rockets that were fired from Iran into Israel. It is an unusual event where a Prime Minister takes to the airwaves at a little after 8:30 at night. That underlines the gravity of the situation. The UK government trying to work out its response. You heard from the Americans a few moments ago, and it's likely that the British will echo the Americans' response, that they are confirming they still think that Israel has the right to defend itself, and that they think that Israel has the right to hit back against the rocket attacks that we have seen today, potentially causing more tit-for-tat escalation in what's going on between Israel and Lebanon in the Middle East. So it will be firstly interesting to see whether Keir Starmer echoes those sentiments from the State Department that we heard in the last 20 minutes. Keir Starmer has been chairing a ministerial meeting today. One of the big focuses, I think, for Downing Street and the Foreign Office will be the several thousand British people who have been still left behind in the Lebanon. There has been an instruction for some weeks now that any UK citizens should leave Lebanon because of the escalating conflict. But up to this point, they have been given instructions simply to take normal commercial air flights out of the airport in Beirut. But there's a very real concern inside government that shortly as this conflict grows, and it sounds from the Americans as if there are yet more stages to come, that the airport in Beirut could become one of the casualties, making it very hard for Brits to go out. That's why the intensity of the warnings has increased. So I suspect that we will hear from Keir Starmer instructions for those remaining Britons who are there. But the main thing, I think, that's going on in London and around the world are just frantic diplomatic efforts to try and stop this getting out of control. Look, there's a tightrope, Sarah Jane, quite clearly, with the Americans saying that Israel has a right to hit back, that this cannot go unpunished. Yet Keir Starmer today, in statements, making clear that he's reiterating the call that he and America and France made at the UN last week for an immediate ceasefire. Quite how you square those two positions at this moment of intense anxiety on the global diplomatic stage as Iran hit back, apparently, as we were hearing, with no notice, despite reports to the contrary, and we saw those missiles through the early evening attempt to land in Israel. No casualties was the word from the Americans from those missiles of any Israelis. One Palestinian, we are told, has been killed. But I think it is the prospect that Iran continues to escalate and that Israel now feels the need to hit back that will be worrying strategists, worrying diplomats in King Charles Street, because the cycle of escalation looks almost inevitably likely to continue at this stage. The question is, what can Keir Starmer say? What role can Britain play at this point in history and at this point in the conflict, just as the Americans and many Middle East partners are frantically trying to de-escalate this conflict, but also what can he say to those Brits remaining behind to give some kind of practical support and practical advice for what they can do if they are caught up in this situation?
OK, Sam, thank you. We are expecting to hear from the Prime Minister within the next 4 or 5 minutes live from Downing Street. So keep it tuned to Sky News for that. We'll bring you the Prime Minister's speech as soon as it gets. I'm going to bring in Miri Eisen, a retired IDF colonel who is in North Tel Aviv this evening. Miri, thank you so much for joining us here on Sky News tonight. I understand that you had to take shelter for around an hour tonight. Talk me through what happened where you are.
So inside my house, and this is my study, you get into your phone. It's an app that the Israeli Homeland Defense put in, and it's actually the new version. Aren't we glad we got to try it out today? I'm a little cynical. But the app said in a very extraordinary way, right now, go to your safe area. And that's never happened before. And so I'm home with another kid. We go to our safe area, which happens to be a stairwell. And when we're there, sirens come in. Now, the air raid siren both comes into your app on the phone, which knows where you are. You also hear it outside. It's very loud. I know that you put it every once in a while on TV. It's very scary. And that's happening. And as you're showing right now, some of those incoming things, I live in an area of North Tel Aviv where there are both the interceptors, where supposedly it's where the Iranians were aiming at, and then there are the interceptions. Sarah Jane, it's never nice, and I know how hard it must be for people in Lebanon right now. My heart can go out to them, but we just had an attack of 190. I'm going to just say for a moment, they weren't rockets. They were missiles with very heavy payloads, and the interceptors were intercepting them, and you could hear the noise, and then you could hear the debris, and all of this is going on all around. So that's me. What you immediately do in Israel is you text everybody, where are they? My husband was in a vehicle on a main road. That means you stop your vehicle on the side of the road and you lay down flat. That's where he was for 35 minutes. And then you start to check out where everybody is. I think that Israel's air defenses, both the active, the ones that do the intercept, but the passive, the home defense that tell us what to do, that give that early warning, that say to go to safe places, and the fact that we act that way is the really only reason that Israel has so few casualties from Hamas rockets, Hezbollah rockets, let alone from Iranian missiles.
Yeah, Mira, it's really interesting to hear what's going on from your point of view. And as you said, you can identify with the people in Lebanon for what they're going through as well. This is not a good experience for anyone to be under any form of attack. We did hear a briefing from the White House a few moments ago. We're expecting to hear from the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer shortly, so forgive me if I have to interrupt you when he takes the podium to speak. But the White House said that this is a significant escalation by Iran, but the attack appears to have been ineffective. But then we've heard from the IRG, the Iran Revolutionary Guard, this evening. Miri, I will rejoin you in a second. So Keir Starmer is just taken to the podium. Let's hear from the Prime Minister first.
The Iranian regime has launched over 200 ballistic missiles at civilian targets in Israel. It's too soon to assess the impact fully. But I utterly condemn this attempt by the Iranian regime to harm innocent Israelis, to escalate this incredibly dangerous situation and push the region ever closer to the brink. It cannot be tolerated. We stand with Israel and we recognise her right to self-defence in the face of this aggression. Iran must stop these attacks, together with its proxies like Hezbollah. Iran has menaced the Middle East for far too long. Chaos and destruction brought not just to Israel, but to the people they live amongst in Lebanon and beyond. Make no mistake, Britain stands full square against such violence. We support Israel's reasonable demand for the security of its people. I've spoken today to Prime Minister Netanyahu, the King of Jordan, President Macron, and Chancellor Scholz. In the last week, I've also spoken to other leaders, including Prime Minister McCarthy of Lebanon, President Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, to try to find the space for a political solution to the conflicts in Lebanon and Gaza. Because I am deeply concerned that the region is on the brink, and I'm deeply concerned about the risk of miscalculation. The situation in Lebanon is increasingly grave. I want to repeat my advice to British nationals who are still in Lebanon. You must leave now. You should register your presence with government officials on our website. We have a chartered flight, and we're doing everything we can to get people out. But the situation is extremely volatile. So if you have the means to leave, the time is now. Do not wait. I'll now take questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. First of all, is the UK prepared to use British military capabilities to help Israel defend itself against Iran, and has that already happened this evening?
This, as you'll appreciate, is an evolving situation. But what I will say is that we stand with Israel and her right to self-defence, and any relevant updates will be provided in due course.
And on that phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu this evening, you and other world leaders have been calling for a ceasefire, for de-escalation in the region. It doesn't seem that those calls are being heard. Can you give us any more detail on what you said tonight to him?
Well, I won't go into the full details, but in all of the calls I've been making with world leaders, I have expressed my concern calls have been about the importance of creating the space and the conditions for that de-escalation and to find that political route forward. With Prime Minister Netanyahu, I also was able to make the case for a ceasefire in Gaza and, importantly, to repeat that the hostages must be released unconditionally and immediately, because we must never lose sight of the hostages who've been held for such a long time now. Thank you.
So what is your message to Israel now? Are you again calling for restraint? Because they would argue that didn't deter a second attack.
Well, my message very clearly tonight is to condemn this attack by Iran, to recognise in clear terms Israel's right to security and to defend herself. And I say that in absolutely clear terms. Obviously, I think all parties are concerned to ensure this doesn't spiral into a much bigger conflict. But on the principle of Israel's right to self-defence, I've been very, very clear. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister there, his address to Downing Street while he was speaking. The Foreign Secretary has also put out a short statement on social media. David Lammy, I condemn Iran's attack on Israel in the strongest terms. Today, I warned Iran against taking action that could push the region further towards the brink. A cycle of escalation is in no one's interest. A short statement that pretty much sums up what the Prime Minister had to say tonight in Downing Street. Let's bring back in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who was listening to that. Sam, the Prime Minister wouldn't be drawn on too much, particularly when faced with a question by our correspondent Liz Bates about whether UK military capabilities were working alongside Israel tonight, as we understood that the US did.
That's right. I think that Keir Starmer wanted to focus on some big picture messages to the nation and to the region, where he wanted to underscore that he stands with Israel, utterly condemning, in his words, the 200 rocket attacks on civilian areas fired from Iran into civilian areas of Israel earlier today. He said that the intent of Iran was to do harm to innocent Israelis and to escalate this incredibly dangerous situation and push the region ever closer to the brink. Now, Keir Starmer made clear that the situation there was so fragile and so uncertain that for British nationals, they must leave now. Please register your presence with the local government officials, with the embassy, with diplomats. He said that they have a chartered flight that people can use, and they're doing everything they can to get people out. But the situation is very volatile. That's what he said. As you say, Sarah Jane, he ducked the question of whether or not British military hardware was involved in the attempts to stop those rockets. It would appear successfully from causing any damage in Israel. However, he also ducked another interesting question. He was pressed by one of the journalists present whether or not Israel effectively has the right now to hit back. Some suggestions from the Americans that this cannot go unpunished. But instead, Keir Starmer emphasised that he believed that Israel had a right to defend itself, but also that there must be that de-escalation must be prioritised. So there wasn't quite the same language, I thought, about the right to hit back. He also said that he had urged Benjamin Netanyahu today to honour a ceasefire that the UK and the US, France and other Western countries have been asking for in Gaza, as well as reiterating the need for hostages to be returned. So a slightly more nuanced statement than the American State Department there from the Prime Minister. But I thought what you saw there was a relatively new Prime Minister seeking to seize a dangerous moment on the world stage, draw together the global diplomatic work that he's been doing over the last week or so. He was in the UN less than a week ago, and both explain to the country what was going on, advise nationals who are UK nationals who are there to get the government chartered flight, and also to say that his government was on top of this and he would be monitoring events very closely, and urged all sides to de-escalate. So an important moment for Keir Starmer. This effectively is his first big foreign policy challenge, foreign policy crisis, global moment where, in his words, diplomacy and the situation is on the brink. He seems determined to take charge, lead from the front, issue statements from Downing Street and be seen to be the front man for Britain in this perilous moment in the Middle East.
Sam, thank you. Sam Coates there, our Deputy Political Editor, responding to the Prime Minister's statement just a few moments ago. I'm going to return to Miri Eisen, a former retired IDF colonel who joins us now from North Tel Aviv. She was sheltering not too long ago from those ballistic missile attacks from Iran into Israel. Miri, if I may, I'll just get you to respond to Sir Keir Starmer's speech there. You were listening in, and he said he was deeply concerned that the region is on the brink. This attack takes the region further to the brink, and also the risk of miscalculation, because from Israel there will be a response. In fact, the Israeli military saying tonight that it will choose when to prove surprising attack capabilities. What do you think this next step will take us to, Miri?
First of all, I listened to him and I found it very interesting as an Israeli that he came out to make this kind of a very open statement against what for us is such a clear-cut enemy, the Islamic regime of Iran. And I want to say for a moment that that was very heartwarming for me to hear it from afar. When I look at what he was saying and I listened very carefully, I too do not want war. Nobody in Israel wants war. What happened on October 7th is pretty much Israel trying to avoid war for many years in a very bad way. And Hezbollah joining in from October 8th, that was 11 months of Israel trying to allow some kind of diplomacy to make sure that Hezbollah cannot do an October 7th attack. And so when we talk about this escalation in that sense, Israel is trying to go against these different, very negative forces, both in the Middle East, but for me around the world. I don't want a bigger war. I'm very glad that we should avoid it. But I say, Sarah Jane, very carefully and very clearly that avoiding a war, you also have to know that afterwards you can have something like Hezbollah, which has the 10th largest arsenal in the world of rockets and missiles and ATGMs and all the different capabilities, and it's a non-state actor. And then the Prime Minister of England tells all of the Brits to leave Lebanon. I mean, these are very challenging times. So I want the diplomacy, but I do think that actors like the Islamic regime of Iran and like Hezbollah, and sadly like Hamas, do not listen to diplomacy. They see diplomacy as a weakness. And so I want to get there, but I think that we do need to take out some of these military terror capabilities, certainly that Hezbollah has, what Hamas has held, and I don't yet know what Israel will do. I do think that we have capabilities to go against it, but I don't know.
OK. Miri Yassin, really interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer tonight, saying he feels that countries, including Israel, need to try to find space for a political solution to what's happening in Lebanon and Gaza. Israel's response to this attack tonight was that the attack was ineffective. However, the Iran Revolutionary Guard also saying tonight that it targeted 3 Israeli military bases and 90% of their missiles fired into Israel were successful in hitting their targets. But both the White House and Downing Street have said tonight it's too soon to assess the impact of what has unfolded tonight. Let's speak now to Kasra Arabi, Director of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Research at United Against Nuclear Iran. Thank you for joining us here on Sky News this evening. First of all, your reaction to this clear escalation in the Middle East tonight.
This is a significant escalation, and it's a significant miscalculation by the regime in Iran, by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. There were no good options for Khamenei and the IRGC. It was a lose situation for the regime, but of all the options on the table, they have picked the worst. An Israeli response, an Israeli retaliation now is inevitable, and they will target military intelligence sites inside of Iran. This is about to get a lot worse, but as I said, the regime in Iran, of all the options available, pick the worst, and it's going to pay the consequences.
Before this escalation, there had been the thought that Israel may well have been holding back because, you know, Iran have been pointing missiles at them, have attacked them before. But now this has happened, it seems that Israel will retaliate. And the idea seems to be that they may target Iran's nuclear weapons program. Is that a real concern, not just for the region, but for the world?
Well, it's certainly an option that Israel has available. And let's be clear, look, what we've just witnessed, what we saw again in April. Look, these attacks appear symbolic, but they are unprecedented in nature. This is a deeply ideological regime. It is a regime that has very, very little support at home. The overwhelming majority of Iranians want to overthrow the Islamic Republic. It is a regime driven by a violent Islamist extremist ideology that is deeply anti-Semitic. It seeks to eradicate the state of Israel. This regime cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons. It is an existential threat, not just for Israel, but also for the Iranian people who have taken to the streets consistently to topple this regime and have been suppressed, have been killed by the very force, by the way, that struck those missiles at Israel today. So the fact that the nuclear sites may be vulnerable to attack, I mean, that's a perfectly legitimate target for Israel because the Iranian regime, the regime in Iran, cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons. And today further underscores that.
Kasra Arabi, really appreciate you coming on to react to this evening's developing story and the situation inside Israel. Israel being attacked by ballistic missiles, nearly 200 of them fired from inside Iran tonight. This is very much a fluid situation. We really appreciate your response. Let's speak now to Sami Nader, who is in Beirut tonight, Director of Levant Institute for Strategic Affairs. No, thank you for joining us. Your thoughts on what happens next? As everyone's been keen to point out, this is a fluid situation. The attacks, we're yet to assess what has actually happened inside Israel tonight, but there will be a response. What do you think the next step will be?
This is a very dangerous turning point because it will mean a full-scale war where we see Iran engaging Israel directly, and this is something all the observers were fearing, and where all the stakeholders up to now were trying to avoid. However, I think that the Iranian strike was very well calibrated, and it was a message that was delivered to the allies before the foes, if I can put it this way. Namely, it was a message for Iranian allies, namely Hezbollah, political base that after the assassination of Mr. Nasrallah felt abandoned by Iran. It's clear that Iran, since day one, tried to put a distance from sliding into a full-scale war and to stay at distance from this war of support Hezbollah was waging against Israel. However, I mean, after the killing of Nasrallah, if I can put it this way, all the red lines were crossed. And if Iranian did not retaliate, this would have been a major blow, not only to their image, but it would have had a devastating impact
Sami,
on
we only have another 30, 40 seconds together. I just want to ask, Iran saying that these were targeted attacks, they were targeting military bases, amongst other things. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, tonight said that innocent Israelis were amongst the targets. What do you think the truth is at the moment, or is it too early to tell what the targets were?
I think that the targets, it's not that clear what the targets are, but the fact is that Iranian dared for the second time to infringe Israel's sovereignty and to send its missile directly to Israel. And the real question now that they have brought...
We have run out of time together, but we will speak again soon. Thank you.
The Iron Dome missile defense system first detects and tracks incoming
Tonight, Iranian missiles rained down on Israel, another step towards all-out regional war. Nearly 200 missiles lit up the skies over Israel as residents were told to seek shelter. Iran says the assault is revenge for the assassination of 3 leaders of Hezbollah.
missile costs a mere $80, while the Iranian Grad missile costs around $1,000.
mothers. Imagine holding your baby, as you see in the picture, trying to protect her, while danger surrounds you, and you don't know who is gonna come, bomb or terrorist. Just think about it. No parents should ever have to feel that. In just 1 year, Yalda, we've been through too much. In the middle of our most important holiday, Hamas commit the worst attack against us. And still, our brothers and sisters there. We faced daily bombing from Hezbollah and huge-scale attacks from Iran that you talked about. Yet, people still question our rights to defend ourselves. How many more attacks must we face before we can finally say, enough? No one should ever have to ask for permission to protect their home and loved ones.
Devere, you talked there about your baby, your family, your concerns. Right. Are you worried that this is going to escalate into something wider?
That's a good question. And I'm not an IDF speak person. I really don't know what's going to be or what's going to happen. But I hear to say that you can look at the picture. That's not supposed to happen. It's crazy. And when you don't know, you can see, you already know. There's a lot of places in Israel that face just right now with terrorists, with bombs, and with all kind of attacks.
Devere Cohen, thank you very much. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. And I hope everything's going to be okay, and we'll be at peace. Good evening.
Devere Cohen, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. There's a resident there of Tel Aviv, and you get the sense of how anxious people are feeling in Israel. Here in Lebanon, people are extremely concerned about the situation escalating right across the region. And as we've been reporting, this is the second time this year that this shadow war between Israel and Iran has burst into the open. Let's get the very latest from our defense and security editor, Deborah Haynes. She's been charting the rivalry and assessing what this could all mean for the region.
Israel will have known this was coming after attacking Iran's allies and interests. Waves of Iranian missiles, many of them blasted out the sky by Israeli air defences. The government here says there will be consequences. Unclear yet how far they will go. The spiralling crisis was triggered on the 7th of October last year when Hamas in Gaza launched a deadly assault into Israel. A day later, Hezbollah started firing rockets into the north of the country. Over the year, there have also been attempts by Iranian-backed militants in Iraq to hit Israel, as well as threats from Syria, even from Houthi militants in Yemen, more than 1,000 miles away. With their defences painfully compromised, the Israeli military initially focused on Hamas in Gaza with a major land and air operation. It meant there was limited capacity to strike back against Hezbollah in Lebanon, even though some 60,000 Israeli civilians were forced to evacuate their homes in the north. Over time, Israel's readiness and ability to use force more widely has grown, with strikes into Syria and also against Houthi targets in Yemen. The most significant fight back started last month inside Lebanon, with a series of escalating attacks against Hezbollah, including the killing of its leader. The Israeli government appears to be trying to shift the balance of power in the region by targeting Iranian proxies in a huge challenge for Tehran. The regime seems to have badly miscalculated the risk that Israel is willing to take, even if it means triggering all-out war. These strikes by Iran, an attempt to deter more Israeli attacks. But the momentum right now is with Israel, and there's no sign of it slowing down. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Northern Israel.
Well, Iran earlier said that they launched this attack with the blessing of and on the orders of the supreme leader, and of course to avenge the killing of the leader of Hezbollah as well as the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. And of course, this attack comes after Israel launched that ground offensive just yesterday in southern Lebanon. Well, Israeli defense forces had been directing people south of the Litani River to evacuate. They then extended that zone to the Awali River, around 40 miles from the border. The IDF has also imposed a closed military zone along 3 communities near its northern border. They also released footage showing strikes in southern Lebanon at these locations. Just have a look. Well, Sky News is unable to independently verify when this footage was actually filmed. Let's go straight now to our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, who is in southern Lebanon for us. Alex, I saw you leave this morning as things developed overnight, and we saw Israel plan to launch that incursion. Just tell us, it's been a dramatic night of Iran launching missiles on Israel, but of course, this ground operation by Israel also continues.
Yeah, and I don't think it's too much of a coincidence that on the same day that Israel announced it was doing this ground invasion, it's being seen very much as a ground invasion by people in Lebanon, including those Hezbollah supporters, but also ordinary Lebanese people and the Lebanese government. I don't think it's a coincidence that at the start of the day we heard about the Israeli troops moving inside Lebanon, and by the end of the day Iran was attacking Israel and linking it to its actions in or against Hezbollah and inside Lebanon. There's no doubt that Hezbollah has taken an absolute hit over the last 2 weeks, quite an extraordinary sequence of events. In just 2 weeks, they've had the booby trap, pager and radio explosions, a lot of their senior commanders hit, assassinations and attacks in the center of Beirut as well as in the suburbs of Beirut, and culminating in taking out their leader, a close friend of the Iranian leadership. So they have really been knocked back and caught in the crossfire. There have been tens of thousands of people, civilians killed, mothers, children killed, lots of injuries, and a huge displacement problem, the biggest in Lebanon's history. About 1 million people on the run looking for shelter. And we've been just hearing more explosions coming here in the south of Lebanon just in the last few minutes before we came to air. So civilians are in the crossfire, and there's no doubt that somehow this could possibly be connected. Have a look at what we found out today. South Lebanon is being pounded by Israeli forces from the air. These pictures provided by the Israeli military show hit after hit after hit, apparently targeting Hezbollah tunnels and infrastructure, and some attacks are clearly in villages and communities. In other pictures filmed by independent media, what looks like white phosphorus is being used, a chemical substance banned in residential areas under international law and which the Lebanese government has repeatedly criticised. The southern city of Tyre has turned into a virtual ghost town, empty streets and shuttered shops, with many people either fleeing the city altogether or staying inside their homes. Only in part of the old town do we find some small groups, residents who refuse to be forced out of their homes and livelihoods. Like Elias Barber, whose business building small boats has been in the family for generations.
No matter what they do, we won't leave. This is my business. Everything we have is here, and we're not going to leave it.
People are scared, but won't budge. Leaving here would be like ripping my heart out of my body, this woman told me. In the southern village of Ain el-Dalab, they buried 13 of their friends and relatives, the second day of mass funerals. Mothers and 2 children are among those they said goodbye to this time. The villagers are in shock after the worst tragedy to hit their community in decades. 45 of them were killed in the most deadly single Israeli strike in nearly a year. They're still conducting mass funerals for those who were killed in the lead-up to this point, and now with the ground invasion, they're very much fearing that there's going to be a lot more of these in the days and weeks to come.
The community is devastated.
Like everyone just wants this to stop, to end. It's our land, it's our land, it's our home, it's our people. We just want to live in peace. That's what we want. That's it. They should not attack any kilometer of our land. It's ours.
Noor, too, can't believe what's happening. What have these innocent people done, she says? Why are they doing this to us? They're killing whole families. She goes on, this is like Gaza too, and the whole world is watching. A short distance away, another fresh Israeli attack hours earlier. This time, a Fatah leader was on the Israeli kill list in Lebanon's largest Palestinian refugee camp. He survived, but 6 others didn't, including 3 children, according to the Lebanese state news agency. They're armed here and keen to show they're ready to fight, with Israel saying its special forces are carrying out operations inside the country.